Hi, Jerry Visick here. What I want to talk about today is the initial stages of lighting the figure in life drawing. And what I'm working with here is just a piece of newsprint, and I have Conte. I'm working with Conte today. Conte comes in sticks. I once heard it described as a cross between pastels and charcoal. It responds really well. The paper responds really well to Conte, and it leaves beautiful dark values and a great range of midtones. It doesn't erase as easily as charcoal, but we want to leave erasing to a minimum. There's different ways of lighting the form, when drawing, and some of them involve erasing, when you're doing charcoal reduction, which is another lecture. But with this particular type of drawing, we're going to be adding the value with the black Conte. So it comes in sticks like this, as I mentioned, and what I like to do is I take a stick out, and I'm working with black today, and excuse me a minute, and I get a piece of sandpaper, and I have the sandpaper on the table or in my hand, and I keep turning the Conte. I keep turning it, in my hand, so I start to sand away the right angles of the Conte stick. So it ends up being, more of a cone like this. So I keep turning it while I'm sanding it, and then I get a, sort of pointed edge. I get this conical edge, and then I get the broad edge too. And all three of those are beneficial for depending, what kind of mark making you're trying to do. So working with the Conte today, I'm going to light a form in a little bit, but I want to talk about how you initially use this to lay it down. When you're drawing a gesture, that's probably going to, may or may not turn into a finished drawing when you put on your initial gesture. And this, once again, this is with Conte, and this is a line drawing. And then, whether you want to, go further with this and develop it more before you light it, or you want to light it from here, you can take this tool, and once again, we have the point, and we have kind of this conical edge, and we have kind of a broad edge, and you can start laying in midtones. The light's coming from this direction, so you can start laying in midtones. Maybe you can even start putting in the cast shadows if you see them, the cast shadows that are on the floor. And after you get these laid in, if you want, well, you want to, because this is great, you can lay in coarse shadows. It's just the beginning stages of lighting. And the coarse shadows are going to make everything look even more three-dimensional. So, with lighting, we have highlight, light, midtones, coarse shadows, reflected light, and Conte really lends itself well to laying them in. So what I'm going to do from here is I've got a drawing over here that I more or less mapped out the values in. So let's put it on top of this one. Maybe I should give me just a minute here. I'll turn this. I don't know if my voice is always going out or if it's always going out during these videos. Okay. It's been really smoky in Los Angeles lately with fires, and I think it's affected my voice. So here's a gesture that I did, and I laid in some, I sort of road mapped, get in there, the values out. Give me just a minute here, folks. I got to get this lined up. I sort of mapped the values out. I'm going to fasten this to my board so I can draw it without it falling out. And that helps me to know what's light, what's dark, what's middle, rather than just guessing at the initial stages. Now, there's nothing wrong with immediately laying in the values without, so-called road mapping them out. But this type of technique seems to be somewhat, students have success with this, because they know what's going to be light, what's going to be dark, and what's going to be a middle tone. What I'd like to do here is take a little tape and kind of take the corners down here. My hands are getting Conte all over them, as they should. And to keep the paper from moving too much, because I'm going to be doing some rendering on it, you know. I don't want to tape it down too hard. Okay, so I have this figure I drew, and I've got, you know, the values more or less mapped out. I'm going to clean it up a little. She got a little messy. So as I said, you know, this is the initial stages of lighting. I know where the light's hitting her and where the cast shadows are coming off her feet, where the form's turning away from the light, etc. So we get not only form turning away from the light, which, you know, are gradations, but we also get cast shadows. I'll explain the difference in a minute. So if I'm going to start laying down midtones here on this drawing, I can take this drawing tool, you know, with this Conte. It's just sort of miraculous how nicely it comes down. And notice there's nothing tight about what I'm doing. I'm just starting to lay them in. You know, we can always tighten up in a drawing later. You can't loosen a tight drawing, but you can, you know, tighten up and render a loose drawing all you want. If you start the drawing as tight, it stays tight. So all we're doing here is laying down some initial midtones. And let's see here. So even just like that, at this stage, she's starting to look like, you know, light's describing her. I used to say she looks lit, but that term's been kind of hijacked lately. She wasn't lit when I drew her, in that sense. So from here, I can do a couple of different approaches. I can come in and start putting in coarse shadows, or I can start putting in cast shadows. When I'm actually doing the drawing, I don't necessarily, you know, methodically think, you know, what I'm laying in each time. But a cast shadow would be here under the breast. Now, a cast shadow is generally darker than other shadows, and close to the form, they're very defined. So there's another one coming across here from her hand down onto her thigh. And then I think we got another one in here. So those are cast shadows, as are these shadows coming off her feet. What are cast shadows? Well, it's misnomer. It's blocked light. It's blocked light. Blocked light doesn't sound as romantic as cast shadow or shadows. But it's where, you know, light's hitting the form and where the form is turning and can no longer you know, describe the form. We're going to get, you know, gradations. But with cast shadows, when the form is literally blocking the light, that's when we get the cast shadow. Okay, so cast shadows here. The foot's blocking the light. The foot's blocking the light. The breast is blocking the light. The arm's blocking the light on the thigh here a bit. And then we get this cast shadow up here where the jaw and the head's blocking the light on the neck. Shadows are transparent. Try to avoid making flat black shadows. You can have some areas in the shadow where they're incredibly dark, but then there should be some transparency in them as they start getting lighter in value. If you see your shadow cast on a sidewalk, you can still see the texture of a sidewalk, or on if you're on a brick wall. If you see your shadow on a brick wall, you still see the bricks. So cast shadows are transparent. Shadows are generally transparent. Okay, coarse shadows. So we've got our midtones, and then I'm playing around with some cast shadows. Now, coarse shadows are the dark area where the light really starts turning from the form. And coarse shadows are way cool. So what I'm doing here with these dark areas is I'm starting to lay in the coarse shadows. And what's beautiful about that is, we get light, we get highlight light, midtone, coarse shadow, then we get reflected light. Now, when I initially put in these light midtones to show how the form's turning from the light, That was terrific. But now when I put in the coarse shadow, I automatically have the reflected light. When light's bouncing from nearby surfaces back onto the form, reflected light's never as light as the light. So when you see light hitting the form, reflected light will never be, the same. I can start adding in a few more values here. Start darkening her hair. And I can even leave, some highlights in the hair, add some texture in the hair. Oop. Don't press too hard. So now she's looking more lit. There's the chair leg coming down here. We have a cast shadow coming off of that. And then this is all cast shadow out here. The fabric that she's sitting on is dark. I'm not going to add that value in right now because I want you to be able to see clearly how the form's lit. I mean, we can start to suggest some of the values under there. But you know what, for this demo, I don't want to start rendering this. I want you to clearly be able to see the difference between the light and dark on the model. Get some value under the eye, under the nose. Making a mess. So, I mean, you can clean it up, when you have to. If you have an area that you did make too dark, let's say your cast shadow's too dark, or your reflected light got too dark, you can come in and lift a little bit of it out. But as I mentioned, try to avoid erasing if possible. We often, so many times think of an eraser, but it becomes a crutch in a sense that when we're drawn, if we are lackadaisical or careless, we know, well, I can always erase. We don't want to be thinking in those terms. We want to use the eraser when it's necessary, but if we know in our minds we can erase, we're not quite as focused as we would be. It's like, California marriage, I can always get a divorce. We have to be committed to our drawing to have success. If we come in with an attitude, I'm dropping my Conte, of I can always just erase it, that's a very tentative approach. So I'll do a little more here to her. I don't want to get carried away and then have to come in and start modifying everything. This drawing could become something that turned into, a 1 hour pose, a 5 hour pose, a 10 hour pose, what have you. But as far as laying in the lighting, the fundamental process, this is a great approach. Thank you for your time.